For the last half hour, I want you to pretend or imagine that this conference is a game. If this conference was a game, technically, all the talks that you've heard until this point represent levels. The people doing those talks represent the bosses of those levels. And by sitting here today and progressing and listening to the talks, you've been progressing through these levels. And now you've arrived at level 9 of the game, the final level of the game. And that's an immense achievement to do in one day in any game, to go 9 levels deep in one go. So well done, and congratulations. If it were a game, it would also mean that I'm the final boss, the big boss. And it would also mean that this is the most difficult level. Okay, so I do think I'm the big boss, although my wife would probably disagree. What I am going to do, I'm going to do my best to make sure that this is actually the easiest level for you instead of the most difficult. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mail&Gaurdian. I run a business called Level180, and what we do is we help companies to win more clients. And a large part of what we do and a growing part of what we do is gamification. So what I'm going to be speaking to you about today is how we can use gamification to improve sales performance. I'm going to be talking about it from a sales perspective, but the elements, mechanics, and methods that I'll talk about here, the same things can be applied to any other area of the business. So my goal today, how I'm going to do this for you and show you how it works. We're going to take a look at gamification and gamer behavior, and what mechanics influence behavior, and how we can learn from what game developers are doing, and what mechanics they're using, and how we can bring those into the workplace to influence that behavior where we work. So I think a lot of what we've heard today talks about the games that have been built. We've had the discoveries, the Fed group, unbelievable stuff that they're doing. But I think there's a gap that exists in terms of how do we just get started in this gamification thing, if we should at all. So I plan to answer those questions by examining the gamer behavior, using a framework to assess some real-life games that influence behavior drastically, and then identifying those elements and figuring out how we can apply them to the work context. So because this is a game, and we need to keep it fun and exciting to the very end, I've hidden an Easter egg in my presentation. So in video games, an Easter egg is a secret treasure. It's not part of the normal story of a game. You generally find it by exploring randomly and by fluke. But when you do find it, there's great reward and treasure. Okay, so I've hidden 3 Easter eggs in my presentation. So what we're going to do to bring the fun elements is, as I said, there's 3 eggs. So the first one's really difficult to find, the second one's a little bit easier, and the last one's really easy to find. But what we're going to do, we're going to have a contest to see who can spot an egg first. If you spot an egg, not this one, nice try, not this one. If you spot an egg, raise your hand and shout Easter egg. Okay, if you do that, if you're the first one to spot it, and you raise your hand and you shout Easter egg, you're the winner. So that's the game we're going to play. But I did say it comes with epic reward and massive treasure. So if you are the winner of the Easter egg, what we'll be doing for you, we'll develop a game for your business area. And how we'll do that is the following. We'll define the business goal. So we've spoken a lot about business goals. So we'll define your business goal. We'll define the leading KPIs. I'm going to talk about the way we do all of these things later on. We'll define the leading KPIs, what drives the behavior. We'll define the player profiles. We'll design the actual game. And using one of the emerging technology companies that's growing at a rapid rate out of Europe, we'll use that exciting technology to automate the game so that your players can interact with it. Okay. We'll do this for 5 users for 3 months. There's no charge and no obligations. Okay. And minimal impact to your business. So it won't impact the way you currently work. This is a lot of work for us. The reason we do good try, that's all it's. Okay, that was the Easter egg section you just came from. So while we're doing this, it's a lot of work for us. Genuinely, we want to show that gamification can be done. We've seen the end goal with the discoveries today. You can get involved and start from the beginning, and that's what I'm going to be teaching you. And that's what the prize is all about. Okay, so I think before we get into the heavy stuff, I just want to summarize what we've learned so far today. Everybody's trying to answer this question of why gamification? Should we do gamification? Is it a fad? Is it real? So why there's such a hype and why it's so significant now, I believe, is because there's two reasons. First of all, these little things we carry around in our pockets continue to change our games, our lives on a daily basis. And the way it's changing our lives from a gaming perspective is more and more people are having access to games, even people who didn't play games before. We've seen speakers talk about this throughout the day. My mom plays Candy Crush. Just about everybody I know, even people who didn't play games now. So it's growing continuously. That's the first point. The second point of what I believe why gamification is so important, if you speak to any seasoned marketer, they will tell you that you cannot change consumer behavior. That's why marketing companies and marketing divisions spend so much time and effort marketing to their prospective customers in the channel that those customers prefer. Now there's an industry that's been flipping that model on its head for decades, and that's the gaming industry. Specifically game developers, they find ways to get the players to play by their rules. So our job, if we're gonna look at gamification as an option for our businesses, we need to figure out what the game developers are doing that's making them so successful at getting players to play by their rules. So luckily for us, a lot of the groundwork's been done. So some of the speakers spoke about this before. I have to go into a little bit more detail, but there's no way we can talk about Octalysis in the time we've got today. So I'm going to give you a crash course on Octalysis. Basically, it's a gamification analysis framework and a game design framework which was revealed to the world in 2014 by a gentleman by the name of Yukai Chow. And it aims to understand, Sean, to your question, what drives behavior with gamers. And he identified 8 core drives. That's why it's called Octalysis. The first drive is called epic meaning and purpose. That means, apart from playing the actual game in the here and now, is there a purpose greater than this game that serves me by playing this game? The second core drive is called empowerment. This means, as I'm playing the game, can I play the game in the way that I want to? Can I be creative? Or have I got a very set, rigid bunch of rules that make me play the game? The third core drive is called achievements. That's what everybody's been speaking about today. Okay, achievements, levels, badges. It's the easiest part to gamify. But as you can see, it's only one of the 8 elements. So one of the challenges we heard about a bank that spent 100 million on gamification, it didn't work. I'm not sure they considered all the areas of gamification that are important when we consider designing games. So achievement is massive, you'll see that in my examples. The next one is the social element. So by playing this game, what social status or influence do I gain by playing the game? The fifth core drive is ownership. So as I play this game, to what degree do I feel that I'm actually part of it? Do I feel like I own a bit of this game? Unpredictability. So is the game completely predictable? If it is, chances are it's going to get boring after a while. So what element of unpredictability is there? Scarcity is also one of the core drives. The 7th core drive, basically it talks about how scarce are the rewards in this game, the Easter eggs that we've spoken about. How rare are they and how hard are they to find and achieve? And the final core drive is avoidance. That talks about the things that players will do to avoid a set of circumstances. And those 8 things together make up Octalysis, the 8 core drives that drive behavior that change the way consumers do things, specifically in the game environment. But as you'll see, this analysis can be applied to any part of our lives, which is what I aim to show you today. Before we move on, we need to just consider these 4 hemispheres on the outside. We'll start with the first one, talking about white hat. That's using achievement, meaning, and empowerment core drives to drive and change behavior using a game. The thing about white hat, it's going to deliver results. Whatever your business goal is, if you use these core drives, it'll deliver results, but it's hard to do, and I'll tell you why just now, and it takes a long time. Okay, so it's a medium to long-term strategy for building games. On the adverse side, we've got the black hat core drives. That talks about scarcity, avoidance, and unpredictability. Now these core drives, they create results quickly. People feel a sense of urgency around these drives. The problem with these drives, as I'll show you later, when you pull too much on the black hat drives, you almost create a trap for your gamers. They feel stuck in the game, like they have to do this thing, but they don't feel good about it. If you think about unpredictability and scarcity, think about the last time you were at a casino. Have you ever seen those people who are addicted to, I don't know what you call them, those one-armed bandit machines where they sit there the whole day? Right, those guys are stuck purely in an unpredictability and scarcity trap. Okay, so that's an extreme case. We all get trapped in it. Does anyone use Facebook for your social feeds? When you go into Facebook and it updates, you read all your statuses. I'm not a big Facebook fan, but you know that after you've read all your updates, if you want to see if there's any new ones, you scroll down and it refreshes. Right? Have you ever done that more than once? Right? In case you missed something, that's like putting the one-armed bandit, a lighter version. Just to give you an idea. Okay, then on the Western Hemisphere, we've got extrinsic core drivers. That talks to achievement, ownership, and scarcity. So what I like to refer to the extrinsic drives as is they work, right? They're hard works. They're heavy achievement driven. The problem with using these core drives on their own, if you rely on them on their own, you could burn your players out. Okay. And on the other side, on the intrinsic side, you've got the fun core drives, what I call the fun core drives. That's empowerment, social, and unpredictability. If you use the fun elements too much, there's no sense of achievement and ownership. So the game will just fizzle out. So the reason this is so important, whether you're starting out or you're quite advanced, you need to draw on a fair segment of all of these drives to deliver a successful game. So what we'll do, I thought we had a little bit more time than we really do, so I wanted to assess 3 games for you. I think we're really only going to have time for one to put the Actalysis model through, and then what we'll do is take what we've learned from this model and apply it to the workplace, specifically sales, in today's example. So the first game I'm going to talk about is a game called Ingress. So Ingress was a game co-developed by Google back in 2013 or 2014, I can't remember exactly when. And basically it was an augmented reality game for your phone. It was the first of its kind. It was phenomenal. You know, Pokemon Go was based on the same technology. This was the first of its kind. The way it worked was players would sign up using their phone. They called on the scarcity elements brilliantly because there was actually a waiting list to play the game. When you got into the game, you had 2 factions. It was a red and a blue faction, if I remember correctly. And basically what you had to do is you had to go and capture portals. Now these portals were landmarks in the real world. So for example, this conference center would be a landmark. But when you approach the landmark with your game on, if you look at the landmark through your phone, that landmark appears as a portal. Now this portal can be hacked if it's owned by the enemy faction, and you can take it over. And that was the purpose of the game. Right, so what did this game do? Basically the factions worked together to fight for world dominance. The more portals that you had as a team, as one of the 2 factions, the more world dominance you had. The more portals you joined together, the more points you got. So how did this influence human behavior? Well, it was massive. So the biggest impact that I can remember from Ingress is obviously it was an international game. And what you could do with Ingress, if you captured 3 portals that form the shape of a triangle, any triangle, and there's no enemy portals in the middle of that, you triangulate that area. And the biggest achievement I saw from Ingress is they had players from Spain, South America, and New Zealand to triangulate a triangle across that expansive area with nothing in between it. The planning and coordination that went into that was phenomenal. I mean, that's 3 continents, 3 countries, spanning a massive spans of area to make that thing happen. You'd also see players, driving their cars and doing U-turns to get to a portal, doing crazy, dangerous things to get to these portals. So how did they achieve this? Let's break it down into the core drives. So think the projector's a little bit blurry, but let's start with the first core drive, epic meaning and purpose. Okay, so for Ingress there was some degree of epic meaning and purpose because it was the first augmented reality game of its time. So from that purpose, players were in something new. They were in a battle between factions. They felt that there was some sort of meaning and purpose. From an empowerment point of view, yes, they could go and hack different portals. They could choose where they went and hacked or did their work. But really, once you're hacking a portal, there was only one way to play the game. So the empowerment was there, but it was a little bit low. Achievement, right. So in Ingress, there were 8 levels. We've spoken a lot about levels today. I won't go into depth about the levels. But basically, from an Ingress perspective, the levels were hard to attain. Once you got to level 8, you were so supremely powerful in the game, you could go and do on your own what it would usually take a team of people to do, because your weapons and tools that you had in the game were so much more powerful as a result for progressing through the levels to get to level 8. But it was very hard to get there. It took players about between 8 months and 2 years. Social influence from an Ingress perspective was massive. You're playing a massive multiplayer online game. People watch what you're doing all the time. As you move up levels, people are they admire that. So the social influence was massive in Ingress. There was a huge sense of ownership because guys felt like they were building this thing. It was the first augmented reality game, and they were part of it. So the ownership for Ingress was massive. Unpredictability, there wasn't a lot of unpredictability for Ingress. Over a period of time you knew what was going to happen with the game. The scarcity was massive because some of the portals for the players were hard to take down, and some of the portals were just hard to get to. You remember you had to find landmarks to hack them. And then of course it was very big on avoidance, right? So there's a game mechanic called sunken prison cost. So with many of these games, particularly mobile games these days, they draw on the sunken prison cost to keep the players in the game, right? That means I've invested so much time in this game, if I quit now, technically I'm going to waste all that time that I've spent so far, right? So I'll just keep playing, and then I can never really quit because I've just invested so much of this time. So if you look at the 8 core drives, Ingress is spread pretty well across the 8 core drives. So technically this is a really well-designed game. But in the end, in my opinion, failed. Because the problem with Ingress is, remember this was the extrinsic area where you have to work. It's work to get the game done. You had to work so hard in Ingress. Literally you had to travel probably hundreds of kilometers at the end of the day to get to your level 8. And by the time you got to your level 8, you were literally burnt out. So after your 8 months or 2 years or whatever it took to get to level 8, that was it. Even though you've got so many cool rewards, you were done with the game. Okay, so that was a brilliant game with too much focus on the work stuff. Yeah?
That little egg at the top.
Where?
You wish.
I didn't see it.
It's not that hard. No. It's not that hard.
Martin, I think it was in the slide before. On your Clash of the Titans or Clash of the Clans or whatever that game was, I think it's in his hand, by the blue monster. Is that not it there?
No.
Ah.
No. I like the try. Okay, so not a lot of time left. This is another game that's doing really well. What I wanted to highlight here, it's similar to Ingress, it draws on the same mechanics. The difference is this game just keeps going. Players will play this. Okay, I'll be honest, I've been trapped in this game for about 5 or 6 years. It's extremely fun and I just can't get enough of it. But what they do really well is the sunken cost prison. Like Ingress did, what they do differently is their achievements. They keep moving their achievements. So my plan was to get out of the game at the beginning of this year. I'd reached Town Hall level 11, I'd almost fully upgraded it, and then they made it Town Hall 12. So now I've got another year's worth of work to do before I can leave the game, right? But I want to because of social influence, it's ownership, it's something that I've built. I can't go into too much detail there, okay? I'm not even going to get into The Witcher 3, unfortunately, we just don't have the time. What I want to do... Another one! So what I wanted to do, the point is you can see these games, what they do really well is they're using a fair spread of the core drivers, black hat, white hat, extrinsic and intrinsic. So if we take the same model, we can apply analysis to the workplace. Remember I said I'm speaking about sales because that's my background, but the same mechanic can be applied to any work environment.
Here we go. Talk about
Well done. Yep, you got it. Okay, so just hang around at the end and we'll talk about the details. Okay, cool, well done. Yeah, well done. Well spotted. I think that's the second one actually. Anyway, or maybe not, let's see. They get easier. Okay, so if we take the Octalysis framework, we can analyze any part of our lives. Part of the thing about gamification is to realize it's not really a switch that you just switch on. Our lives are becoming gamified, we just need to realize it. And Octalysis gives us the means to do that. So this is a sales environment, a typical sales environment. Obviously not everyone's the same. Let's take a look at how the sales environment looks through Octalysis. From a meaning perspective, well, in a sales environment, we're part of a team, so there is some sort of epic meaning and purpose, but beyond that, there is none. Okay? Generally, there isn't. So it scores low on the epic meaning and purpose, the work environment, from a sales perspective. Empowerment, there's no empowerment, right? In sales, you've got a target, you've got tools to get the target, and that's it. So there's no creativity. You come to work and do your job the way you're told, and that's it. That's sales for you. One of the biggest challenges with sales. It's heavy on achievement for sure. You've got to achieve your sales targets. You've got to get your commission. You've got to get a certain amount of meetings set up every week. We've got to make a certain amount of cold calls every week. These are old and outdated KPIs, key performance indicators, leading indicators. Part of gamification, which I'll talk about now, is we need to fix those indicators. Okay, what else does it do? Social influence. There is some social influence because if you've done something really well, your colleagues may look up to you. But it's not driving it in the right way. I could be the class clown and have big social influence, but it's not driving the right behavior in the organization. Ownership. In sales, there's a higher degree of ownership than anywhere else in the organization, I believe, because they look after the clients. But generally, the ownership also scores relatively low. And of course, unpredictability. Well, the work environment is almost totally predictable in sales. The only thing you need to predict is what sort of mood your boss is going to be in. Okay. Scarcity. Commissions and bonuses create scarcity, so you've got to work to get those things. So there is scarcity in the work environment. And then, of course, there's this avoidance. You don't want to lose your job. I mean, what a great motivator, right? So that's the sales workplace through the Octalysis framework. Okay. Does it stand true? Let's think about it, right? So it's heavy, as we can see, on the extrinsic values and heavy on the black hat values. So don't we see in many organizations, sales has probably one of the highest turnover of staff out of any other area in the organization. Octalysis reveals to us why. It's because the sales guys are being burnt out. It's too extrinsic, it's too much hard work. There's no intrinsic, there's no fun happening, and we feel trapped. That's the reality, we feel trapped. We want our commission and our bonuses. That's what sales is about. So how can we fix the workplace, the sales work environment through gamification? What you say? Yeah.
In unpredictability.
No, there is. There is. Yeah. Okay, so what you see in the blue here is, so that was the current workplace which we've just looked at. And then the green bar on the outside represents changes we can make to the workplace with gamification that will have an impact on team performance and individual performance. And the first one is about epic meaning and calling. So Gerrit spoke about it earlier. What's your business's purpose? By your team, whether they're in sales or whatever else, and they come to work and they do their daily tasks, what do those tasks do for the world? Now that sounds like a really big question to ask, but the reality is that question can be answered quite easily, right? So you need to figure out what that meaning and purpose is and communicate that to your team. The second thing is, and this is where the magic happens, you need to set a new set of leading indicators, KPIs. So in sales, the traditional ones I spoke about are commissions, meetings set up, calls made. Yes, those things may never go away, but they're not leading indicators, right? In sales, we should be measuring things like conversions. What percentage of a person's deals convert from lead to deal one? How many qualified leads has a salesperson brought to the environment in a week, a month, whatever the case may be? How many deals on average is a person or a team progressing through our sales process and through our pipeline? Those are leading indicators in sales, right? So the starting point to building a game is to find out what those KPIs are, and then assign points to them, right? So I think Mick, it was you earlier who asked, how do you gamify an area and make sure you don't subtract from another area? So when you identify these new KPIs and you assign them points, you assign the points based on weightings. So identify your KPIs, figure out which ones are more important, and when you assign points to them, make sure that the ones that are more important outweigh the other ones. So if I'm doing a really difficult task, I earn more points for that than a really easy task, as an example. But the point is, you have a point system based on the KPIs that are being achieved, and then you have a level system based on the amount of points that people are getting. That does two things. First of all, it changes the way you measure the achievements and put achievement rewards in place, and it allows the player to play the game in their way, right? So rather than just having to do this, 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 or this, I can figure out to my strengths what I want to do to play the game. And I'll be rewarded equally by levels. So you could have level 1 is up to 100 points, level 2 is up to 200 points, etc., etc. Social influence, and we're almost out of time. Social influence, real-time recognition. When those KPIs are achieved, broadcast it to the team. When they've reached a different level, share that amongst the team on their phones, screens, dashboards, etc. Ownership. Well, ownership comes with showing them what benefits they've got by working towards a goal, and also show them progress bars. Progress bars for their team levels, the individual levels, etc. Scarcity, change the scarcity, and instead of just commission and bonuses, think of cool contests like a green jacket. Most highest conversion rate over a period of year gets to keep a green jacket. By having the green jacket, you have certain privileges. As an example, unpredictability. Easter eggs. Each month have a running or floating trophy for a random KPI that nobody knows about. When somebody hits it, we broadcast it to the team and say, hey, look, by the way, this person just found the Easter egg. Well, and then avoidance. Avoidance, you want to avoid the I don't want to lose my job avoidance trap, and you do that by increasing the meaning and ownership.
So is the intention to try and get a better balance across all 8 factors, or to start moving away from the black hat extrinsic to...
It's a brilliant question. Did you hear the question? He asked, do you want to move away from black hat and move towards white hat, for example? So it depends on the business objective, right? So if you're in sales and you wanted to drive results quickly, you're going to have to draw on black hat. But you could create a contest that's black hat, right? And as your game progresses, you may need elements of each. It depends on the business requirements. Okay, so it's not to say that one is right or one is wrong. Clash of Clans, for example, are using a combination that works for them. So what I'm showing you here is how you can increase the areas that are sadly lacking in the sales and work environment. And the same applies to everybody else. So that's the theory behind it, right? Building games. If you don't start with the theory, don't bother. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what technology you can build, what budget you've got. If you don't get this right, if you can't figure that out, the rest doesn't matter. But once you've done that, it becomes about how do you actually build the game and how do you make players interact with it. So this comes back to the question a couple of guys asked around budgets. What if we don't have 300,000? And by the way, that 300,000 I don't think included salaries. Or we don't have 2 billion, right? Plus, we don't even know if it's going to work. So there is technology that already exists that answers the questions around making these type of games come to life so that the players can interact on their laptops, their phones, screens in their offices, etc. Okay, those are some of the results which we've spoken about previously. First of all, if you're going to gamify, you're going to have to really look at your KPIs, your leading indicators, right? Using modern, effective KPIs. The second thing is reduction in staff turnover. Okay, reduce the burnout factor, the extrinsic factors. Quicker onboarding, increased engagement, Greater transparency because now everybody's working together in a game. Increase in accountability, and obviously if you do all of these things, increase in performance.
Don't ask me to call that.
So remember the game was the first one to spot an Easter egg, okay?
It's not free time, it's not free.
So just to conclude, guys, a couple of questions I get a lot. First one is pricing. Okay, so we really want to do it. We don't know where to start. There's platforms that already exist. There's some really cool emerging technology that works. Some of them start as little as $15 per user per month. Okay, so it's not inaccessible. But the idea is you want to start small. Once you've figured out what mechanics you want to use, figure out a user group. Start with 5 employees, see if you can get that to work. Take your learnings and grow it to the rest of the organization. It doesn't have to be a 300,000 rand upfront investment. Okay, the other thing I get a lot is it's a fad, right? I understand that. There's a lot of people who jumped onto the bandwagon with gamifications and a lot of empty promises of what it could do. But the reality is more and more people are playing games. So if you think of your current workplace, how many colleagues do you know of that are playing games? And then of those that aren't playing games, do you know for sure that they aren't actually playing games? There's a chance that most of the people you engage with in your work environments are already engaging in some sort of game. So what we're going to see, I believe, more and more, is that players are going to look to work as a place to engage in their games. So the question is no longer about will it work, the question is more about when will you begin. Thanks, guys. I had to rush it a bit. We had a little bit more time, but
We can take 1 or 2 questions from the floor. People sort of engaging during the presentation as well.
Yeah,
So those
yeah.
questions won't go away. Martin,
Cool.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Martin Lamberti,
Thanks, guys.
180, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very informative. And that's, I suppose that's game over, everyone. That's the end of today. If you want